Back in 2009, my brother and I through hiked the Appalachian Trail and we did it ultra light. So I wanted to share my gear list for that hike. We were hiking the trail a lot faster than you typically would. We did it in 97 days. Certainly not the fastest, but faster than the typical schedule. So we needed everything to be really light. So here is what we packed. First was our sleeping bag. So I used a Marmot Pounder sleeping bag. This is a mummy style sleeping bag with a hood. It's made of synthetic down, so when it gets wet, it's not as susceptible to losing its loft. A lot of problems with down, it is ultra light, but if it gets wet, it becomes almost useless for staying warm. That really wouldn't work for through hiking the Appalachian Trail unless you're going to have a really rock solid shelter and rock solid waterproofing of everything. And going ultralight, it's really hard to make sure that everything stays dry all the time. Really, even not going ultralight, it is. So we opted for synthetic material, and the Marmot Pounder is really good for this. It only weighs 17 ounces, so super, super light. It goes down to about 20 degrees, I think. And there were times when I got a little cold. In the Smoky Mountains and up in Maine in the higher elevations. But for the most part, combined with the sweaters that I would carry, never had any issues like not being able to sleep or hypothermia or anything like that. So this was a great bag. The second item and the heaviest item on the list was my Go Light Jam Pack backpack. A lot of people at the time in ultralight were wearing Sil Nylon or Gossamer or Spinnaker fiber, the really, really light fiber backpacks that were a little bit lighter than this Go Light pack. But this pack was ripstop and it was very durable. So I was concerned about having a pack so light and thin that it would potentially rip at the seams or even have punctures in it from sitting on rocks or from branches or all the various types of surfaces that you are on the Appalachian Trail. So the Go Light was a nice compromise at 19 ounces. It had a good amount of storage. I want to say it was probably a 40 or 50 liter pack. And it also was a top loading pack that had pretty good waterproof capabilities. And it had two mesh side pockets that I was able to put my platypus water bottles in and the Aquamira water filtration drops that we would use. And that made for really nice stops where I didn't have to open up the whole pack to carry the water or the water filtration system that we were using. The next item was my body sleeping pad. So I used a 3/4 length sleeping pad, not my whole length, but because I'm a pretty short guy, it covered most of my body, probably down to my knees. And this was the Ridge Rest 3/4 length body pad. Now it has a bunch of ridges in it. It's not particularly soft and doesn't provide a lot of cushion, but what it does do well is insulate your body's heat. So a lot of the heat loss when you're camping and sleeping on the ground is from the ground itself because of the level of compression that's happening underneath your sleeping bag. You're not getting a lot of loft. You're just basically sleeping directly on that surface. So a sleeping pad isn't just about comfort; it's about insulation, and this is just absolutely essential. And the Ridge Rest helped me. I needed to learn to sleep on my back during the Appalachian Trail, which I'd never done in my life. But when you're tired at the end of a day of hiking, it became pretty easy. Um, we also carried a 9-ounce camera so that we could take pictures on the trail. I think this was an old Nikon with AA batteries. I don't remember the exact brand that was. We each carried our own Sil Nylon tarp. So Sil Nylon it's very similar to the fabric used on sails. It's super light and it's very puncture and stretch resistant. And I just carried a 5 foot by 7 foot tarp that I would then. It was just a rectangular tarp, and you have poles and grommets that you kind of pull the tarp across, and you create a little shelter that way that kind of sits off the ground, and the condensation and air goes and flows out So you're covered, and it does work in the rain, but it's not a fully enclosed shelter, and that worked out fine. Did we occasionally want a fully enclosed shelter for bugs? Yes, but at the end of the day, keeping out bugs when you're in the woods is kind of a losing battle anyway. So, the rain jacket that I carried, and this is mainly psychological more than anything, because you're always going to get wet when you're out in the woods in the rain, either from sweat or from direct rain, was the Dry Ducks rain jacket. So this is like a super ultralight rain jacket. I think it's made for like hunting or biking or something. It's really really light. It is 5.7 ounces. Sorry, the tarp is 7.5 ounces. And this thing just kind of balls up, and you can throw it in there, and it's almost unbreakable. The zipper broke, I think, when we were on there, but what it does is it just provides a little block between your skin and cold rain coming in, and that, when you're out there hiking, is massively psychologically helpful. It's almost like water torture or something. If you're out there and don't have some level of protection from the rain, it just can get really really cold and wear you down if you don't have some sort of rain jacket. So we definitely wanted a rain jacket. We carried tent stakes, aluminum tent stakes. I believe they were actually gutter nails for houses, but they're super light. Those things are super light, and they're like hollow aluminum, but they work perfectly for the tarp system that we had with the little paracord. Worked well. We used darn tough socks. So those are 3.5 ounces, and common popular wool hiking sock. I use the ankle cuts, and they lasted maybe half the trail, and then I had to get a second pair, which is unheard of because those things last forever. But yeah, the water treatment that we used was called Aquamira. It's a chlorine based system that you kind of mix together, wait 15 minutes, and then pour into any stream water, and it kills. It's antibacterial, so it just kills the bacteria in the system, and really never had any problems with that. There's really no weird taste, and while we waited for the stuff to mix, we kind of would take breaks. Then I had a headlamp. So the headlamp was a Petzl, just like a simple Petzl headlamp. It weighed about 3 ounces, so almost nothing. But we did do a fair amount of night hiking, mostly at the end of the day, not in the mornings, in order to get to shelters. So we would typically end the day at a shelter, occasionally a campsite, and you absolutely need a light, not only for hiking on the trail, but also for fiddling around with your bag at night and getting into the shelter. We carry platypus water reservoirs, which are these plastic bags that are basically weighing nothing. I think they weigh like 2 ounces total. And we would have two 1.8 liter reservoirs, so that adds up to almost a gallon of water when fulfilled. But obviously, like, we were trying to be conservative, and if we were in an area where there would be a lot of water sources or public water from some kind of building, then we would try to minimize how much water we had while also staying hydrated. I had a plastic bag pack liner, which kept everything dry. So if the outside of the pack got wet, that would stay dry, and that was about 2 ounces. You got to stay clean, so we kept about 2 ounces of Dr. Bronner's soap that, every couple days, or whenever we had a chance, we would clean off in the stream or do something. And that's nice because it's biodegradable and it's safe for the environment. Occasionally you get waterfalls, and then you can do a shower in a waterfall, which is pretty cool. I took a little Leatherman micro multi-tool, and that's just like cut stuff or have like a little scissors or knife and stuff, just for whatever you need. Oftentimes you need to cut rope or cord or string or something for various equipment changes. I had a really light ground sheet, so underneath the ridge rest would go the ground sheet to keep the condensation from the ground, especially when you're sleeping outside, as well as just the dirty floors in the shelter, to keep your bag, especially the part of the bag that's not insulated by the ridge rest pad, that would go there. I had a sil nylon stuff sack, so it was an ultra light stuff sack, maybe about that big, to hold mainly my sleeping bag, and that weighed like 1.2 ounces. A couple miscellaneous things left. That's pretty much everything, but we had paracord for the bear bag. So in some places you have to hang up by rule, hang your stuff up. So when we did have to bear bag, I had a little rope that I could, tie to a rock and throw over a branch. That was like an ounce. We use an alcohol can stove, so that could be a whole different video, but it's basically a Coke can cut in half, and then the top is flipped over, and you use denatured alcohol with it, typically heat, which is I think it's like an engine coolant or something like that, but it's available in almost every convenience store and gas station. So we carried our identification, some matches to start fires, obviously, a spoon, and a fork, like plastic. So that's everything that we carried. Now, on my body, I was carrying Montreal trail running shoes, which I had to switch out a couple times over the trip. I had a cycling shirt, so just like a pure polyester cycling shirt with the pockets in the back that I occasionally would use. I had compression shorts underneath, just like kind of like short running shorts. The socks were the Darn Tough socks, which I talked about, and then the poles were made by Lecky, which are ultralight hiking poles, and poles are just absolutely essential for catching yourself or kind of balancing well on the trail. Because you do hit a lot of rocks, it's very nice to have that like third and fourth leg. Sometimes you can kind of pull yourself up with them, but you do have to be careful in loose rock situations, or when you're doing kind of bouldering, you gotta not use them. I would just hold them out to the side, because the poles can get stuck in between two big rocks, and then you could end up breaking them or tripping and falling. I had a waterproof hat most of the trip, and then just an extra pair of socks, and that's all.